fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to episode 273 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, here with my co host, Adnan Ikic. He's at Say Which Way. Adnan, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. I'm not up there in Alabama with you. Down there in the trenches, getting up close and personal with some potential Falcons in the future. But yeah, I'm here. Uh, I'm here holding down the fort in Atlanta.
Yeah, well, we got lots to talk about, including the Senior Bowl today. I'll give you guys sort of my overall takeaways and stuff like that because the third practice did wrap up this afternoon. We'll also talk about a busy week for the Falcons where they've hired most of the staff. It seems like hired, retained, etc. So we're going to talk about our thoughts on the Falcons coaching staff that's coming together under Raheem Morris and dig into that a little bit, and then of course give you guys the draft takes that I know you all want so much. We're gonna jump into that pretty quickly here, but yeah, we're gonna get to all the big topics because this has been an unusually busy January for the Falcons. I remember last year this time was pretty sleepy up until the actual event happened, but it seems like it's been pretty packed with stuff here, and which I'm not upset about. It's always nice to have the content, certainly. But real quick, guys, before we dive in, let me bring you word from our sponsor real quick, betonline.ag. Folks, it's Super Bowl time, and it's going to be, of course, the San Francisco 49ers versus the Kansas City Chiefs in Las Vegas. Probably the most predictable Super Bowl, maybe not the most novel. I was definitely pulling for the Lions, hoping to see them in there. But the Super Bowl, very popular time to bet, and BetOnline, of course, is your number one source for those odds, stats, trends, and lines up to the minute. They've got everything from those point spreads, hundreds of player performance props, everything you need to get started for your Super Bowl betting and more. So what are you waiting for, guys? Head to that website, betonline.ag today. They also have an app for mobile access. You can stay updated on all that action. Make sure to check out BetOnline and use our promo code BELIEVE. It's BLEAV. And guys, BetOnline. Game starts here. All right. Adnan, let's start with some coaching staff takes. First, just because that was sort of the news of the day today with the Falcons officially hiring Ike Hilliard as their wide receivers coach. But we also, of course, since our last show, we've seen Zach Robinson hired as offensive coordinator officially. Jimmy Lake hires as defensive coordinator. Quite a few guys staying on to continue. It seems like quite a bit of stuff. Even Dave Huxtable, the defensive assistant that was already reported to be leaving to go with Ryan Nielsen, he is going to be staying on as a senior defensive assistant. So a lot of stuff happening here in the Atlanta coaching staff. How are you feeling sort of on the whole about how Morris's staff is coming together?
I mean, I think it sends a very loud message when you fire a head coach and then retain everyone else. So that's the biggest sort of takeaway that I got from that. That one, Raheem Morris, he knows some of these guys, and it shows you that they want to be on his staff. Like we know that one of the big positives of Raheem Morris, of hiring Raheem Morris, is that he's a very well connected individual. He's been around forever. He's been on a lot of defensive staffs. He's actually even dabbled in, on the offensive side of the ball. He was the wide receivers coach for the Falcons a few years ago. Former head coach, and you can see those connections sort of paying dividends right away. The most exciting hire is probably the offensive coordinator. Um, just because Zach Robinson over there in Los Angeles comes from the Sean McVay coaching tree. I know, big knock. He did not call plays in Los Angeles, and that's fair. That's completely fair. He's going to be probably a first time play caller, but you know, Matt LaFleur didn't call plays in Atlanta. You know, Mike McDaniel didn't call plays in Atlanta under Kyle Shanahan. Those guys ended up being, great offensive coordinators, great head coaches down the line. So it's not really, it is a knock, it is a negative, but it's not really anything to sort of completely shoot him down on, especially because Robinson was very, very in demand. I would say the most in demand offensive coordinator candidate in this entire cycle. And the Falcons got him rather quickly because he and Raheem Morris are like this, apparently.
Yeah.
And you're talking about bringing someone in from that McVay system who has learned a, a very, very modern system under arguably the most modern head coach the NFL has seen over the past few years. We're gonna see a lot of motion implemented in this offense next year. I think we will see some of these individual skill position players like a Drake London, like a Kyle Pitts, completely utilized to the best of their abilities, which is not something that we saw under Arthur Smith the past few years. You noticed it in Los Angeles. Matthew Stafford is very good, but even with Matthew Stafford sort of wearing down a little bit, last year they still supported two very high-end wide receivers in Cooper Cup and Puka Nacua. So yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with that hire, and that was the most important hire that the Falcons made because admittedly, I am a little bit underwhelmed with the Jimmy Lake hire on the defensive end, but defensive coordinator isn't as important in this situation under Raheem Morris because Raheem Morris will have, he'll have his say on the defense and he may even completely call plays on defense himself. Just the same way that under Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator hire was not as important as the defensive coordinator hire. Because now this will be Zach Robinson's complete this is his show on offense. He is the coach of this offense. And if this offense, you know, plays up to expectations in the way that we hope it will, then Robinson will be a hot commodity in head coaching cycles. And, that's going to be bad for the Falcons, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But yeah, overall, I'm happy. I'm very happy to see the team retain a lot of these coaches. I'm happy to see TJ Yates moved over to becoming the quarterbacks coach and having an actual dedicated quarterback coach moving forward. And this team is gonna. I feel like this secondary is going to have a lot of leadership over there. Between Jimmy Lake being a very long time DB's coach before he became a defensive coordinator at Washington, between Raheem Morris, between the DB's coach being retained from last year, it's going to be. I like this coaching staff. I'm very, very happy. Raheem Morris admittedly wasn't my number one pick as head coach. He wasn't my number two pick either. But what was very important is that he puts a team around him that's going to help him be successful, and I think he did exactly that. And I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I feel the same way about those hires and sort of the structuring that you mentioned. And the big one that everyone was waiting to hear about was Zach Robinson, right? That was the were they going to be able to get that high end coordinator hire if they were going with the defensive head coach? And that was one of the reasons I liked the Morris hire in particular, was because I thought he would have a great chance to bring in a top coordinator like a Zach Robinson he's worked closely with. And you heard Robinson had interest from multiple teams. The Bucks definitely wanted to hire him, among others. And you heard what Robinson said. It was like if Raheem Morris calls me, I'm going. If Morris gets a head coaching job, I'm going there. Wherever he goes doesn't really matter to me. And that's the thing. Like with Zach Robinson, it's what you said is just really resonates, because there's a lot of people, not going to call them haters necessarily, but people that are looking to nitpick everything about Raheem Morris, which regardless of who they hired, you were going to have people that didn't like the hire, and that's totally fine. And, I would have nitpicked the shit out of everything Belichick did, so I don't blame you necessarily, but, saying like, oh, well, show me what Zach Robinson has done to convince me that he's a good hire. Other than that he's worked with Sean McVay and is known as this up-and-comer and has all this interest, what has he done? There's no other answer than that. That's why people are interested. Like, he's worked under Sean McVay, he's risen up the ladder steadily, and from a very successful coaching tree, and has a lot of interest. So that's all you can do. He had, other than a few preseason games, he hasn't called plays. So it's not like I could point to a bunch of stats to convince you that it's a great hire. If you're determined to think it's a bad hire, then you're not gonna like the hire, and there's not really anything anyone can tell you. We'll just have to wait and see. Little bit of an odd hill to die on, but defensive coordinator was definitely more of like an open question. I think the white whale was probably, Ejiro Evero, but it seems like that was not going to happen. Either Carolina's going to force him to stay, which would probably be a bad decision on their part, but they have the right to do that, or he's going to go back to LA or something like that, with LA losing a bunch of guys, and that's probably a better fit for his career trajectory. So I don't blame Evero for not necessarily wanting to stick around or wait for another NFC South job. But Jimmy Lake is an interesting one because of how things ended in Washington, University of Washington, where he got fired for putting hands on a player. And that obviously didn't work out very well for him. But prior to that incident, Jimmy Lake was an elite defensive coordinator. I think Washington had the top defense in the Pac-12 multiple times, was routinely a top 20 college defense. I think obviously his experience with DBs is unquestionable, and you mentioned it, keeping Jerry Gray and Steve Jackson around too. I think they're going to have a very, very good secondary staff, and I'm really excited to see how that turns out. So, the other hires that you brought up, TJ Yates moving to quarterbacks coach, that's sort of a no-brainer to me. I don't know why he wasn't already the quarterbacks coach. I mean, I can't imagine that Yates was like, I don't know. It seems weird to move him to wide receivers coach, considering all of his experience was at quarterbacks coach and he is a former quarterback. I'm guessing they were just like, oh, we like you. Do you want to just be the wide receivers coach? It's like, okay. But typically the pipeline is the quarterbacks coaches move to offensive coordinator and move to head. So it's like nothing against wide receivers coaches. It's a great job. It's just like, I don't think like TJ Yates was clamoring to be the wide receivers coach. So that situation was always a little bit odd to me, but TJ Yates goes to quarterbacks coach where he's got the experience. I think that's a good move. And then Ike Hilliard comes in now at wide receivers coach. And
I know Mohamed Sanu was
Yeah.
clamoring on Twitter for that job forever.
Yeah, I'm not shocked that they didn't make him the wide receivers coach, because he doesn't really have any NFL coaching experience. And like, even though I was just talking up, quarterbacks coach, wide receivers coach is a serious high level assistant position on a team, given the importance of wide receiver in today's NFL. So, Sanu's probably not coming in as the wide receivers coach. It's unlikely to happen for him. Offensive assistant, offensive quality control coach, that could happen. I don't know that it's going to happen in Atlanta, but that is more likely to be his first job. So I wouldn't rule out that Sanu could get an assistant position as like an offensive assistant or a quality control coach, or maybe a coaching intern just to start. He clearly has the passion for it and really wants it, and I know the fans are interested in it. So I'd love to have Mo around the building. I think he's a fun guy, just a good presence to have. But we will see what happens with that. But yeah, I mean, the other one that I think we should definitely spend a minute on is Dwayne Ledford sticking around, which that
was, other than Robinson, that was my favorite move.
Yeah.
I was very scared of losing Dwayne Ledford, and I was very happy that the team was blocking interviews for him. I've honestly been kind of worried about losing Ledford to an offensive coordinator job for the past couple of years already. But I mean, if you weren't sold on him after the 2022 season, I don't know what else, what else you can see from this offensive line to really be sold on him, because they came out and they were, once again, if you look at PFF stats, I know it's not gospel, but it still gives you like a grade to work off of. They were once again a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. Once again, a dominant run offense unit. And, this is with a rookie left guard in there. This is with Caleb McGarry. Started off pretty rough to start off last year, but he bounced back. Chris Lindstrom has developed into arguably the best guard in the NFL. He should have been an All-Pro. But, I digress on that. What we can get into it for a whole hour about why Jesse Bates and Chris Lindstrom, and Jesse Bates especially, should have been an All-Pro over fucking Antoine Winfield and Kyle Hamilton. Excuse my language. I'm going off topic here. But yeah, Dwayne Ledford has been awesome for the team. I'm incredibly excited, and apparently he's going to have uh, a bit of a louder voice in this
Yeah.
offense as well, pretty much coaching the running game while Zach Robinson more so focuses on the pass, which it could be a good thing because Robinson is a first time offensive coordinator. It sort of helps take something off of his plate a little bit because he will also be a first time play caller as well. So it could be a dynamic duo, so to speak. But yeah, I'm very excited. I think Ledford's a very elite offensive line coach, and I think the team's lucky to have him.
Yeah, I've liked what I've seen from Ledford, particularly the depth just seems to play well. And that's a big thing. Like that, I think you could I know a lot of people have mentioned, the starters didn't necessarily live up to last year's level. I think Lindstrom had another great season, but you know, I I don't blame anyone for being a little disappointed with the play of the starters, but I feel like every time we have to have depth players step in, and this year we had quite a few at tackle, like Storm Norton. Storm Norton last year with the Chargers was awful. I mean, really bad. And he was completely rock solid in Atlanta. And I think that has a lot to do with
He
his
was
coaching. And
he was solid. Like
yeah,
he was solid enough to where I'd be comfortable with him being the swing tackle again next year. Like
yeah,
Storm
yeah,
Norton came in and there was not much drop off at all from Caleb McGarry. And that's not a knock on Caleb McGarry. Like Norton was genuinely like more than decent. And
yeah.
even remember that game where the team lost four starting offensive linemen. I forgot who it was against, but it was late in the season. Maybe it was the Bucks. Um, but yeah, they still held up. Like, we weren't on the show the next week talking about how bad the offensive line was. I don't think we really criticized the offensive line very much other than the very beginning of the season at all much last year, and that's a really good thing because that's one of those positions where the less you talk about them, the better it is because, it's a very thankless job.
Yeah. No, I think that first quarter of the season, we were starting to get a little worried, and then things really stabilized. So I appreciate that. And like Tyler Vrabel too. I remember the game where we had to have Storm Norton and Tyler Vrabel play, and Tyler Vrabel came in at left tackle and was fine, which was crazy to me. But good on. I like Ledford. I'm confident with him being here, and it is interesting how probably like a typically about 25 to 20% of the coaching staff stays when you change head coaches, and it looks like it's going to be closer to like 50% or more here in Atlanta. So,
Also,
um,
just while we're talking about the offensive line in Ledford, I feel like we would be remiss if we didn't mention Drew Dahlman
mhm.
because we were critical of his snaps, and that is something that needs to, be perfected because there were many snaps that were low that were, that weren't really up to par from an NFL standpoint. But when you're talking about from the blocking sense, Drew Dahlman was one of the best centers in the NFL last year from a purely blocking perspective. And I remember talking to him in camp, him and Caleb McGarry separately, and both of them just sang Ledford's praises and talked about how influential he was in both of their developments. And yeah, I mean, Drew Dahlman is right now looking like a fifth round steal, and center is not a position that we're talking about at all when it comes to the draft, when it comes to free agency, as a position that we have to upgrade. Whereas I felt like that's one of the positions that sort of dominated the conversation the last couple of years, along with edge, along with guard, of course, with safety. But now it's like, you sort of have your center of the future. And I'm fully comfortable with Drew Dahlman being the day one starter at center. And, that is even with the snap issues. And I've been a very vocal critic about the snap issues. But I think that's something he can improve on. But I have no complaints at all when it comes to the blocking, run or pass.
Mhm. No, me neither. I think it really solidified later in the season, and that was nice to see for sure. I know we had a question from Jay Coop asking about Jordan Fuller, the Rams safety. Do you think we could possibly get him? He's not a free agent as far as I know, or maybe he is. Let me double check. Okay, yes, he will be a free agent. You're right. Yes. So yeah, no, I think that could be a potential pickup for sure, Jordan. Or Jay. Jordan Fuller's the player. Jay is the person who asked the question. Yeah, no, I think Jordan Fuller is definitely someone to look into. The Rams safety did have a nice 3 interception season last year. I think he was pretty solid to above average according to PFF. And they need someone other than Richie Grant
They
because I
need
think
an
we
upgrade.
know that's not
They
going to
have
happen.
to upgrade from Richie Grant.
Yeah,
Like it's not negotiable. I think at this point, like I don't think we can wait on Richie Grant anymore.
yeah,
I think the second round premium that you paid for him, you sort of have to admit the sunk cost at this point. Not that Richie Grant's going to be out of the league, but I don't think Richie Grant is a starting level player in this league, and I don't think he was worth the second round pick. Looking back, using hindsight, we were excited for it at the time. We were hoping that Richie Grant would be a playmaker, a difference maker at the time, but at this point, it's been what, 3 years? Like,
mhm.
it's been a full 3 seasons. Like, that's a very fair, and I know he didn't play much in year 1, but that's because he didn't know the playbook apparently. So,
Yeah,
you can't really give him a pass for that. Um, but 3 years is a very fair amount of time to assess, you know, a player moving forward, and I think the assessment with Richie Grant is you need someone better than him next to Jesse Bates if
yeah.
you wanna take your defense to that next level.
No, absolutely. And I think Jordan Fuller's a good one given the connection there. I like Cameron Curl too from the Commanders. Since they're changing schemes, he could be let go. As like allowed to walk. He's also a free agent. Those are definitely two guys I'll be keeping an eye on. But yeah, safety is definitely a need area. I don't know if they're gonna go for a veteran considering how much they're paying Jesse Bates, but um, Kyle Duggar is another guy, or is it Xavier McKinney? But again, those are gonna be really high priced type safeties, and you wonder, are they willing to spend a lot next to Jesse Bates considering how much Bates is making? It's ideally it's a spot that you add in the draft, but given their other needs, the need for a quarterback, all that stuff, I don't know how big of a priority it's going to be to draft a safety. It might be one that you just sort of have to take a day 3 stab at, and maybe a relatively lower end sort of free agent, like a lower end starter, like an average starter, which would be an upgrade over what the Falcons had. And they do have DeMarco Hellams too to pitch in there, but yeah, it's
I really like Helms as a depth piece, but I don't know if I'd be super comfortable with him being the day one. And he could prove me wrong. He could come to training camp and just explode this year. But I definitely think safety is high up on that priority list, and I don't think it's a position you can really punt anymore. I mean, not that they punted it last year with Bates, but
no,
I feel like they did. They were hoping to get more from Richie Grant, and it's fine. It's fine that you didn't, but it's worse if you try to continue sticking with him and saying, all right, he was a second rounder. We have to get back our investment because you have to just admit this on cost. At that point, you're just hurting the team moving forward.
yeah, yeah. So we'll see what goes on there. Um, but yeah, I do think that's safety is definitely a need area. And it's a good way to transition into the Senior Bowl talk because there were some good safeties on display. I wouldn't say it was a crazy great class, and I was sad to see Michigan's Mike Sinris still didn't end up playing, which was disappointing because I thought he might get some more run at safety. He's their sort of like nickel defender star guy, but you know. The safeties didn't like blow me away this week here in Mobile. There's definitely some really good player like Cooper DeJean, but you're probably better off putting him at outside corner. So, there's going to be talent at safety there, but day 3, I don't know if you're really looking at a ton of starters. Maybe you're probably going to have to spend if you really want to get a good starter. But looking at the positions that the Falcons really need, wide receiver was the one that really ended up that was probably the most impressive position overall. I know we had a question from Dave with the $5 saying,
The
do you guys
dog in
yeah.
here.
Is that Choate? No. No. He says, do you guys expect the wide receiver room to change drastically? Yeah, definitely. It's going to change drastically. It's going to be Drake London, and we'll see. theoretically, Van Jefferson might make more sense in this offense than he did in Arthur Smith's offense, given, Zach Robinson's got experience with him and all that stuff. But other than that, and maybe like Kadero Hodge because of his special teams acumen, and the special teams coordinator is the same, Marquise Williams. So I imagine they'll still value Hodge in that role, and I think he's a solid depth receiver. But um, yeah, I think the wide receiver room is going to change drastically, and this was a great class at the Senior Bowl. They didn't have any of the like first round guys here, like Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Roma Dunze. Those guys weren't here, but the guys that were here were all pretty good. I mean, honestly, other than like North Carolina's Tez Walker, who just struggled, everybody else seemed to either play like what you would expect or like raise their profile with guys like Michigan's Roman Wilson left, after yesterday's practice, just kind of like mic dropped. Same thing with Florida's Ricky Pearsall, who is a guy that, I had heard some hype about, but he was cooking everybody and looked good. So Louisville's Jamari Thrash, clearly the best receiver on that other side on day 3.
Talk about
Lad was good. Lad was what you would expect. I mean, Lad on day 1 cooked everybody. Lad on day 2, it seemed like everyone kind of adjusted, and he was still good, but didn't blow the doors off like day 1. And then today he was back to cooking people again. So Lad is gonna do a great job. A lot of people were like, "Oh, is he first round now?" I don't think so. I mean, it is what it is, right? Lad is a smallish slot receiver who does have good athletic talent, but he doesn't have elite size or elite deep speed. He has good deep speed, but it's like that's a second round guy. Like the best ones of that archetype typically go in the second round, and that's not a knock on him, but I don't think he did.
If we hired Bill Belichick, Lad would be high up on that board.
But Belichick just got those guys like as undrafted free agents. He just like plucked Wes Welker and Julian Edelman in like the 7th round. Lad's too high profile for Bill. But I do like Lad, and that's one of the things is like, what is this offense going to look like under Zach Robinson? Because if it's going to look like Los Angeles, we need a slot receiver like desperately.
Yeah, this team, this iteration of the Falcons is going to invest much more in the wide receiver position than we saw last year. Because outside of Drake, I think the Falcons last year spent the least amount. I mean, even including Drake, he's on a rookie deal. I think the Falcons spent the least amount of money total in the wide receiver room out of every team in the NFL last year. And I mean, look at it. It was Drake London. They brought in Matt Collins as the number 2. He didn't do what we expected. I think Hollins had a bit of a disappointing year. He was great during camp. He was a great interview during camp, but I feel like that was sort of the peak of his season last year. And I'd love to keep Kadero Hodge because of the special teams. He's a special teams ace. But outside of that, you could tell that Arthur Smith didn't really value the number 2 wide receiver, the slot wide receiver, or anything of the sort. And I think, I think because the roster was constructed in such a way, there's going to be a much more heavy investment in wide receivers this year, whether that be using a day 2 pick on them in the draft or, paying up for them much more in free agency. But the Falcons wide receiver room this year is going to be, I'd say, much more talented. But that's because there's going to be a much bigger investment in it this year than there was last year.
Yeah, and that's the thing is they need wide receiver talent. They needed it last year, and they didn't really go get it. That was kind of a surprise that we talked about quite a bit. But, I think to me, wide receiver is going to be one of the biggest needs. I wouldn't be shocked if they draft 2. Maybe more, especially late on day 3, if they just take a couple shots at it, because this is a good class. Like I said, I mean, I think you go up and down the list of the guys here at the Senior Bowl, Arizona's Jacob Cowing unfortunately got hurt during the team drills today, but he has showed out. He's more of that shifty guy. They've got big ones like Brandon Rice and, Xavier Legette was doing well yesterday. He wasn't there today, unfortunately. They come in all shapes and sizes. If you want a speed guy, Roman Wilson was awesome. Jamari Thrash from Louisville, both of those guys probably raised their draft stock at least a whole round. Roman Wilson is probably in the date like the round 2 conversation now. Florida's Ricky Pearsall just looked like a really well-rounded guy with good speed, good size, good route running. Just that quintessential wide receiver 3 sort of guy. The Falcons really need a wide receiver 2, really, and they also need a wide receiver 3. So, you can get wide receiver 2s typically on day 2, and you can get wide receiver 3s pretty easily on day 3. So, you can. This will be a good class to do that. There's a lot of talent. A lot of Luke McCaffrey from Rice. He was playing well and looks like a good wide receiver 3 type of guy. And there's a ton of talent in this group at wide receiver. It's super deep. There's gonna be wide receiver 2s available in the second round. There's gonna be wide receiver 3s available into.
If the Falcons have a second round pick,
well, maybe they'll have 2.
Yeah, maybe they'll have 2, maybe they'll have 1, maybe they'll have none. So
yeah, that's the big question. Yeah, is the quarterback question.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's a lot more difficult to evaluate when the team is in such a position to where you have no idea if they are interested or if they are planning on possibly making a move up. And the move up would be for a quarterback, obviously. But yeah, it's a lot more difficult to evaluate in January than as opposed to in years past where it's like, all right, the team is at 8. The team's at 8 a lot every single year. They're picking at 8. But before it's like, all right, that they're gonna make this pick at 8 most likely. Because the Falcons just never trade down. Like I don't remember when's the last time the Falcons traded down in the first round. I don't know if that's happened in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I think we actually did ask the question, and I think someone from the chat pulled it up that it was like 1990 or something like that, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, like we don't know what the team's going to have in the second round. We don't know if they'll even have that extra second round pick because it depends on Calvin Ridley re-signing. Well, shit, we don't know. Maybe maybe the team will be interested in Calvin Ridley in free agency. But yeah, I'm just speculating here.
No, yeah.
But yeah, it's just a reminder that it's still it's technically February now. I was going to say it's still January, but it is now February.
Technically, it's February 1st as of recording this show. Yeah. But no, the big question is quarterback, and I'm sure we'll have an entire show probably in the next couple weeks dedicated to just talking about the quarterback question. And that's the kicker, because it's like, do they make some kind of crazy trade to go up into the top 3 to get a quarterback? That will change the draft capital they have and change their plans everywhere else. Do they send their second round pick or one of their 2 second round picks to the Bears for Justin Fields? That could change their draft plans all over the place. Do they feel like they have, do they take a quarterback at 8? After what I've seen at the Senior Bowl, I don't think so. Michael Penix, Bo Nix, both good quarterbacks, but not top 10 quarterbacks.
Also, if you're going to make a move for a quarterback, I think I've mentioned it before, but if I haven't, I'll say it now. If you're going, it's such a flawed system, right? Even if you take a quarterback in the top 5, like the hit rate is like what 50%, and then it goes down drastically after that. And the Falcons tried to sort of game the system by, picking a third rounder and trying to turn Desmond Ridder into the franchise. And, that doesn't happen. It doesn't work. Not everyone's Russell Wilson. Not everyone's Dak Prescott. Those guys, not everyone's Tom Brady. Those guys are very, very rare, and it cost the last regime their job. My thing is, if you're going to make a move for a quarterback, and I think this plays into a donation that I saw in the chat a little bit earlier asking this question.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mad Tom K said, how would we feel about trading up to get a quarterback if the compensation is reasonable? Yep. My thing is, in the draft, if you go quarterback, do it right. Like, go up and grab one of the top 3 guys, because you have maximize the hit rate, because that is too important of a position to sort of cheap out on. And I even think using the 8th pick and not moving up in this draft to take a Penix or Bo Nix, whom I think are both, a full tier below the top 3 guys, I think that would be in my definition cheaping out. Um, if you're gonna get a quarterback through the draft, go up and get the guy, get the franchise guy, because that's the biggest hole that this franchise has to fill now, and that's a gaping hole that this franchise has had since Matt Ryan retired. And you see how long some franchises wander through the wilderness, without a quarterback go, and some of those franchises, pick and miss on top 5 picks. I'm looking at you, New York, the Jets, shit, the Giants too. But I mean, there's no right system, but the way you can maximize your chances is to pick before the other teams. So yes, my answer is absolutely. I would love to move up for a quarterback, and if you don't move up, I do not want to take a quarterback at 8.
Yeah. And like, I think the one chance you have, obviously, if the Bears want to keep Justin Fields, then number 1 pick will be for sale. That is going to be a crazy sweepstakes that probably every quarterback needy team is going to be in on. So your chances of winning that sweepstakes are probably pretty low. But that would be one way. I don't think that the Bears are going to keep Justin Fields, though. So that's probably not going to happen. The second one would be number 3. If the Patriots don't take a quarterback or they're looking to trade that pick, if they don't take, if they, they're either going to take a quarterback or they're going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. And if they're tempted by Marvin Harrison Jr., I would totally understand because he's a elite prospect. I mean, we know that. So if the Patriots don't take him and the Cardinals are on the clock, there's going to be a frenzy to get Jaden Daniels there. That the Falcons should definitely be interested in. But the question is, can you wait? Can you wait until the draft to find out if the Patriots are going to take Marvin Harrison Jr. or not? Now, I presume people will know before that, more or less. And I imagine the Patriots might even try to shop their pick if they're not going to take a quarterback. But ultimately, I think the chances of trading up for any of these quarterbacks is pretty low. And I don't, if the Patriots do pass, then there is a chance. It's going to be really expensive. My preference, if the Patriots don't take Jaden Daniels, is to do what it takes to get Jaden Daniels. And the Falcons are in a good position to do that because they're already in the top 10. And a lot of the quarterback needy teams are further down. So they'll have an advantage there. But, ultimately, probably not the biggest chance to do that. So if that's the case, then you have to figure out, are you going to trade for Justin Fields or are you going to sign a veteran? And it's just, I don't think Kirk Cousins is leaving Minnesota. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Apparently,
And I wouldn't be interested anyway, but
he wants what, 90 million over 2 years. Like I'm out. Like I know we discussed Kirk Cousins. The thing everyone glosses over is the Achilles tear. Like that's not a minor injury, and Kirk Cousins is not a young guy, and he's looking for more money now than he was when he was 7 years younger, not coming off an Achilles tear as an unrestricted free agent, with a chance to reset the quarterback market. I'm out. Like if that's the ask, I'm completely out on Kirk Cousins.
yeah, so I don't really see Kirk Cousins. And then it's like Russell Wilson. I mean, there's not a lot of options. So like if you're not
He's
able to
cheap.
get,
Like
yeah, if they'll be cheap, sure, for a couple years while you sort of figure out what you're going to do. I mean, it's not the worst idea in the world, but, ultimately to me, it's like it should be Justin Fields or you should be expecting to get Jaden Daniels by trading up. And if it's not one of those things, you're probably not in a good way. Like you lost. Like you lost out on the trade and you lost out on Fields. And then you're in a bad spot going into 2024 where you're probably punting. And fans aren't going to be happy about that. I mean, that probably means you're starting Ritter again. And that would be bad. Like in the grand scheme of team building with a start over, they would be more or less tanking. Like they're not actually tanking, obviously, but starting Desmond Ritter next year because they failed to get Fields or trade up, is low key like we're playing for a top pick next year, and we're hoping to get our quarterback then, which would suck for us to have to go through another crap season, and it would obviously accelerate the timeline on Raheem Morris's eventual, hopefully not eventual firing, but that would be like the worst case scenario, which is that they don't get the trade up and they don't get Fields, and then they're kind of out of options at quarterback. So, but that's going to happen to teams because there's not enough quarterbacks to go around. So
I
somebody's
mean,
going to lose. Yeah.
and I mean that this is a conversation that we did not have to have for a long time because of Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
And I still remember people trying to drive Matt Ryan away because, for whatever dumb reason. Um, this is life. This is life without a franchise quarterback. Like you are you are fighting for a finite, limited amount of resources with many other teams that will do anything to get one of these guys. And you get one of these guys, and that's not even guaranteed to be successful. We were very spoiled with Matt Ryan in that era for 14 years. Like that's incredible continuity. Um, but yeah, like it could be worse. You could be like the Panthers this year, and you completely tank for another team. Where the Chicago Bears. How good does that Bryce Young trade look for them right now? Like they moved from what 1 to 8, and they got number 1 again next year. And I mean, Chicago. I personally hope that they're convinced that Justin Fields is the guy, because I feel like they would be, excuse my language, they would be idiots. They would be morons to pass on Caleb Williams. As good as Justin Fields is, as much as we both like Justin Fields, we've talked about him. I would absolutely trade a second round pick for him. You have to be a moron to pass on Caleb Williams
Yeah.
when you have that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I hope the Bears are morons. Maybe they are.
Maybe they are.
Yeah, they're not exactly like the Patriots organization of like the 2000s and 2010s. So, we'll see. But hopefully that nostalgia and emotion of like, the fans chanting, "We want Fields" and stuff in that last game against the Falcons, hopefully that gets to them and they're like, "Oh, you know what? Let's trade this pick too." And if
Yeah.
that's the case, then Atlanta should be, running to the phone and, offering whatever package of picks and potentially players it takes to move up to number 1, because I would make a Godfather offer for that number 1 pick. But that's just me
Yeah.
personally. I'm sure many people in Atlanta would, because you put Williams on this team, it would sort of be a fever dream. But we're still a very long way away from that. But you are right. If this team has to tank, it's going to suck, because this team has 9 home games next year, and there's going to be a lot of empty seats if
Yeah.
Desmond Ritter is starting week in and week out. But maybe long term, the quarterback class next year isn't as strong as the one this year, also. So that's another thing to take into account. But we'll see where it goes, and who knows? Maybe the team goes into week 1 with their franchise quarterback. We're still a few months away from knowing, because that's the frustrating part of this time of year right now.
Mm-hmm.
You're in full off-season mode, but you have no idea. What's going to happen. It's still way too early, and all you can say is we'll see.
Yeah.
But we want answers now.
Yeah. The biggest chess piece for the Falcons, the biggest domino to fall, is going to be quarterback, and we're probably not going to know what's going to happen there until March at the earliest. So, um, they have to do something. We're gonna probably, like I said, we're probably gonna do a full episode on the quarterback options available. And the thing is, like, if they do go the veteran or Fields route, then they do get to pick at 8, and that probably would lead to them having an edge rusher there that they want. Whether that's Dallas Turner,
I would
Jared
love
Verse, or
Latu at 8. I would not be
Latu.
mad.
He was great this week. Yep.
I would not be mad at all at Latu at 8. I
Yeah.
think that would be a home run pick if you do not get a quarterback.
Yep. So I mean, again, well, if they stay and are able to pick at 8, they can get that edge rusher that they desperately need, which I think that they will do if they stay at 8. So, and there was a lot of good edge and interior talent at the Senior Bowl this year. Darius Robinson from Missouri, a guy that had some fans in like the early day 3 range. He is a fringe first rounder now. Cam Jordan like player, can play inside a little bit, can play on the edge. 6'6", super long arms, athletic, dominant. FSU's Braden Fisk, awesome, just complete explosive interior pass rush type guy. Flew into the backfield like they didn't know what to do with him. He was so fast off the snap. He was just getting free real estate in the backfield, and he, like I said, Laiatu Latu was doing well. Penn State's Adisa Isaac was doing well. I liked Marshawn Nealon.
You mentioned Darius Robinson.
Yeah, Darius Robinson. He was probably the biggest winner of the whole week, I would say, like overall. Like I think he's a fringe first rounder now. So, it sure would be nice if we could do like Latu or Dallas Turner or verse at 8, and then like Darius Robinson with the second round pick, and it's like, okay, hopefully we've solved the pass rushing crisis.
I would not be against double dipping pass rusher, especially given the fact that this team has not had a competent pass rusher since John Abraham still, and that was a decade ago. And this team has not had two good pass rushers since Abraham and Patrick Kearney back in the day, and that was not a full 2 decades, but it's getting around there at this point. But yeah, pass rusher is definitely a big need, and I feel like pass rusher has been high up on that list of needs year in and year out, and you've never been able to take that down off the board because you just have never been able to hit on it. I mean, TJ Watt was there a few years ago, but team took Takk McKinley, and look at that sort of set this team back, a few years when it comes to pass rusher.
Yeah.
We thought Vic Beasley was the guy, but he was a flash in the pan for a year. And, he didn't really care about football that much. So,
Yep.
Leave it to the Falcons. You get one of those all-pro pass rushers, and he just, he has a charity basketball game instead of going to spring practice next year. But, I digress.
Yeah. And, Clay Melton's asking, is there any chance the staff decides Ritter is fixable? I don't think there's a 0% chance that somebody on staff is like, oh, we still like Ritter. We want to see what we can do with him. But like, there's no way that their plan A is to try to fix Ritter. Like, it's just Ritter blew his chance. So like, let's be honest. Like he blew his chance to be the starter like this. Like, this is not going to happen again for him. So he's going to have to benefit probably from an injury or some bad luck to play again. But I don't think that I think there's a chance he could play again and then be better. So like, that's not a 0% chance, but he's not gonna get a starting job handed to him again in the NFL.
No, I don't think he's a starter worthy player in the league at all. And I mean, I think I was Ritter's most vocal critic going back to camp, but I think he's a fine backup. Like I'd have no issues with, having Ritter next year as a QB2. And moving forward, he's on a rookie deal. I would save the cap space from cutting Heineke, and sign a QB3 for cheap, or we'll see what happens with Logan Woodside. You have a competition maybe for that QB3 spot. But yeah, I don't think any team is jumping at the opportunity to have Desmond Ritter as their starter, especially because last year he had everything given to him. He disappointed to the point where he got benched for Heineke twice over the course of the season.
That's a whole other show topic, is the stupidity of benching Ritter twice for Taylor Heineke, who was not better. But
yeah,
that's part of the reason Arthur Smith got fired, is for benching Ritter twice for Heineke, who was not better. So
Arthur Smith's pitch apparently to Arthur Blank was, like everything is fine, we just need a quarterback. So I can only imagine how much the Falcons would have given for a quarterback, trade up or trade this offseason if Arthur Smith remained. But that's sort of a parallel universe type thing. Now he's gone from Ritter to Kenny Pickett, which isn't much of an upgrade over in Pittsburgh.
I'd rather have Ritter in the 3rd round. So
no, yeah, absolutely. for opportunity cost, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kenny Pickett is.
He hasn't been better than Ritter yet.
But he was a first rounder.
Yeah. So, we got, we got a lot to get to. This is gonna be a busy off season, and I like ultimately I like the hires. I like this class, the Senior Bowl. I think this is gonna be a good deep draft class. I think this is like there's a lot of defensive line talent on the interior and on the edge. Wide receivers really strong. You know, it it just doesn't feel like this is a team that's going to take Nix or Penix in like the late first, early second round range. I think they sort of have their like depth, like quarterback they want to develop with Ritter. I like Penix. I've always liked Penix, but it's just like I don't know what the medicals are gonna say. I mean, Penix was definitely the best quarterback here in terms of throw, like passing, but you
I mean, the
know,
bar isn't really, you know,
it
huge. I saw
it was a
some
lot better than last year. Like I'll say that. But like
I saw
nobody
some
blew you
opponents'
away.
passes too. Like it
Yeah,
was, it was underwhelming, but also there is the quarterback tax too of
yeah,
because he's a quarter. If the medicals come back clean, someone is going to take him before the Falcons' second round pick. I would not take Penix at 8. Even if the medicals are clean, I think Penix has his own red flags,
yeah.
beyond that.
He has his issues.
Um, and I feel like a few of those, like I'm not one to just like take one game sample size and just run with it the way that people did with Terrell a few years ago. But the national championship did highlight some of those issues as well. The touch on the deep ball, uh, the lack of mobility, in the pocket. So I would not be if you don't trade up for a quarterback, I'm fine with not taking one at all in the draft.
Yeah,
Is what I'm getting at here.
yeah. I mean, like Joe Milton from Tennessee. Like if you just want a toolsy project guy on like day 3, he was probably the one that I was most intrigued by. He looks exactly like Anthony Richardson, except he's not a great quarterback. Like he's big, athletic, has a cannon arm. He just like Anthony Richardson was raw, and Joe Milton is like a whole other level of raw. But if you're looking for that toolsy guy to develop for several years and see if you hit, like he's probably the one. But that's not going to fix your problem this year. So yeah, it's not a great situation if you can't get one of the top 3 quarterbacks. So that's why we keep coming back to, well, that's why Justin Fields is not such a bad idea. And I know people are like, oh well, you're gonna have to pay the 5th year option. Yeah, you are gonna have to pay the 5th year option, but it's 1 year and it's guaranteed. And if you're trading a second round pick for Fields, you're going to give him 2 years to see if he's worth it. Like, I mean, that's why, like, you're not trading a second round pick for a 1 year rental. Like, you're going to give him a year or two to see if it works out. And if it's not good in 2024, you're drafting somebody in 2025's draft to compete with Fields. And then, no matter what, like, if Fields isn't worth that 5th year option in 2025, that's too bad. It's 1 year. You're not. This isn't a situation where you're going to be killed on the cap for 5 years from the Fields trade. Like, this is not a Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson bad contract situation. You got one expensive year and one cheap year. And, if he plays well, you can extend him and spread that money out. If he doesn't play well, you're going to have to eat that one bad year. But it's like,
But
you got to do something. You got to do something.
also, like if you get a quarterback, no matter what, you're gonna have to pay him eventually.
Yeah.
Like I've seen that argument against Fields, and I don't really like it that much. Oh, like why do you want to get Fields when you're gonna have to pay him? Like if you hit on any of these quarterbacks and they end up being what you want them to be, you're gonna have to pay them, and it's probably gonna be even much more years from now when that quarterback market skyrockets again because that NFL TV money is not slowing down anytime
No.
soon, and that salary cap is going to keep going up and up and up. And those quarterback contracts are going to keep going up and up and up. But like, unless your plan is, all right, we're just going to draft and develop a rookie every 4 years, which is not a sustainable plan, you're going to eventually have to, bite that bullet on that quarterback contract. And that's
Yeah.
what cap manipulation's for.
Yeah, and it's like, would it be nice to get a rookie quarterback that crushes it? Absolutely. That's the
For
best thing
sure,
you
yeah,
could
that's the
do.
goal, but everyone wants that.
Yeah, everybody's trying to get that. And that's exactly why you're probably not going to be able to do it this year. So you either punt and try again next year, which rarely works for teams that punting like that typically doesn't work. It basically it's what the Falcons did, except they actually thought they were going to win, which I guess in hindsight seems funny. But Um, you know, you typically can't do that. So like if you can't get one of the top 3 quarterbacks, you probably have to see what you can do with Fields or get a bridge guy like a Russell Wilson. And that's kind of your options, and we'll see how that plays out. But ultimately, like I said, I think it's a good class of receivers. I think it's a good class of defensive line talent. There's good secondary players too. Toledo's Quinion Mitchell was like the star of the secondary, playing really, really well. He's definitely a high first rounder at this point, I think, like top 20. We saw some nice things from like Oregon's Kyrie Jackson and Notre Dame's Cam Hart, 2 big corners. We'll see if the Falcons are going back to more zone. They could be interested in guys like that. There was a lot of good players at the Senior Bowl this year. There's a lot of talent. The Falcons do have a lot of resources in terms of picks, in terms of cap, so they can make some moves. But really, like, we're not going to know exactly what the plan is until we get the quarterback situation figured out, because everything else kind of builds off of that. Because if you have all the draft picks but you spend the money on quarterback, then you're going to go a certain way. If you have to spend all your draft picks to get the quarterback and you still have all the money, you could go a different way with things. So it depends a lot on what they do at quarterback, I guess. And like I said, way more to it than what we even covered tonight. But it's going to be an interesting conversation throughout the offseason. What do the Falcons do? We did have a couple of donations here. Jason Kane says, excited for the Falcons 2 revenge games this year, the Steelers and at the Commanders. Gonna enjoy seeing Arthur Smith using Najee Harris as a tight end this year. And then saying, against new Commanders head coach Dan Quinn's, I'll really enjoy the Falcons beating him by simply throwing it to the tight ends and running backs, which is the kryptonite to Dan Quinn's defense. Also, he says, I wish Nielsen was kept as our DC. He was the best. I think he was our best DC since Wade Phillips. Yeah, that's a nice deep cut there. And then we have one more, $20 from Jay Coop. Thanks, Jay. Says, I think Penix is better than Drake May. So prove me wrong. Show me a game where Drake May showed you more. 4,500 yards back-to-back seasons in the national championship. Although Michigan's D-line was way better than Washington's O-line, and that's definitely part of the reason they lost. Penix as a pure passer, he throws a beautiful ball. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, when he has time and he can set his feet and unload that thing, Penix throws the prettiest ball in the class without question. But the injuries, the lack of mobility, the questions about how does he handle pressure, that's what's going to probably keep him out. Whereas like May, I think May is a really high floor quarterback, and that's why I think you're seeing people really like him, because he's shown some flashes and the floor is really high and he does all the little things well, and doesn't have the injury questions, right? And I think that's why people like May more. And then you got Caleb Williams, who's just like, he's just a complete prototype, crazy athlete, latest in that like Kyler, style of quarterbacks. That's a great athlete, tremendous on the move, great arm,
great improviser.
Yep. So, whoever you like, it makes sense to me. And then Jane Daniels, terrific runner, amazing deep ball thrower, who's improved every single year as a quarterback. I love Jaden Daniels too. So again, those top 3, like, I have no problems. You can argue for whichever one you like the best, but I really question if Atlanta's going to have an opportunity to get any of those guys. Unfortunately, it would be nice if they did, but
my Bears, Justin Fields was right there for you. Give him another chance.
Yeah, bring him home. Bring him home, TF. I like Fields too. So I think those. I think if you get one of those top 3 guys, or you get Justin Fields, we're cooking. But,
I'm fine with Fields, but I was pleading with the Bears to keep him.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then we get Caleb Williams. So either way, we win. We'll just be on the phone with Chicago. It's like, if you want Fields, then we'll take your number 1. If you don't want Fields, we'll take Fields. Just give us a call back. Here's our number. Here's my card.
But by the way, this is Terry Fontenot from the.
This is Fontenot, by the way. Yeah. He and Poles know each other very well.
Sure you guys won't have to talk to Rich McKay. I promise.
Yeah, no, he's no longer on the call. Yeah, apparently.
Rich McKay will no longer be, the third line breathing, on the telephone as we discussed.
Someone listening into this? What is that? Who is that? Yeah, but Yeah, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate everyone following along with the Senior Bowl coverage this week. I will have like a takeaways article coming out probably over the weekend, kind of wrapping up my thoughts. Um, Appreciate everyone for interacting and all that stuff. It's been a fun one. Once again, thanks to everyone for donating to the fundraiser. It's helped a ton with covering the costs. As always, appreciate you guys. Please like, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please do check out the channel memberships if you're a video watcher. If you're podcast listener, check out the Patreon for those exclusive perks. And before we head out, first of all, I want to thank betonline.ag for sponsoring today's show, and want to thank, of course, my co-host Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way for helping out with tonight's coverage. Adnan, anything you're working on you'd like to let the people know about?
Just gonna plug the Falcoholic, for your up-to-date 24/7 Senior Bowl takes, draft takes, free agent takes, and yeah, free agency's coming up, I think a month from now already. So, we're really hitting the ground running.
Oh yeah, we're kicking into high gear here with the off-season coverage. I'm gonna have like salary cap stuff and free agency stuff coming pretty hot and heavy, along with the post Senior Bowl mock draft. Probably post Senior Bowl mock draft first, and then a cap breakdown for this year, because I know you guys are ravenous for that stuff. And yeah, it's kind of a delayed start because of all the coaching stuff, which I don't mind. It's nice to have that. That was exciting, interesting stuff. Except for the Belichick stuff, I could have done without that. But my heart was definitely there's a little bit of despair in the group chat maybe about Bill Belichick, but thankfully we don't have to deal with that eventuality. And we got lots of great stuff coming your way. Thanks again to Bet Online. Thanks to you guys for watching. Again, like, subscribe, leave that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. We'll be back next week with more terrific content for you guys as we get our off-season content machine kicked into high gear here on the Falcoholic Live and the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Until next time, guys, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Kevin Knight. He's Adnan Ikic. We'll see you next time. Have a great night, folks.